Okay, so 2020 has kind of sucked a bit, hasn't it, overall? Let's be honest. Oh well, hopefully this will cheer you up. My top 10 favorite games of 2020. Hello, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple, and if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want to see more top 10 lists, please have a browse through the rest of my video content and see if there's something for you. If you like what you see and consider subscribing, I'd love it very much. And if any of the games I'm talking about in this top 10 take your fancy, then if possible, try acquiring them from zatu.co.uk, where you can use my code at the bottom of the screen and in the description to get 5% discount off your entire basket of games. Maybe it's a bit late for Christmas at this point, but perhaps you want to do some shopping in the new year, then consider a purchase now. I'm sure you'll all join me in thinking that we cannot wait to give 2020 a giant kick up the back and basically get rid of it forever. Granted, in the UK, we've got just as bad things to worry about in 2021, but I digress. Yeah, we weren't a fan of 2020. It's been a pretty horrible year for most people, I would say. And for games, it didn't really fare much better. What? Wow, this is one of the hardest lists I've ever had to put together. And not because of a good reason like, oh, I had so much good choice. No, I was really strapped to find 10 great games to talk about on this list. Now there are some good reasons for that though, which I do have to be a little bit more lenient with. Firstly, COVID basically said, you lot don't get to play games for much this year. That didn't exactly help, did it? Yeah, there's only so many games I can play solo and online, and so trying to get people together for games was a lot harder. But even that aside, I just don't think 2020 was really good for games. I said that about 2019, although I've come round to thinking, yeah, you know what, actually there was actually a few good stuff in 2019. It was actually not too bad a year, but I don't think I'm going to come round and say 2020 was a good year, even later on. There's a reason I do these retrospective lists, and yes, you will get a 2019 retrospective list, don't worry, that will follow after this list. But I do those because a year later, I've probably played some of the games from the previous year again, and want to see how, after a year, have some of them faded, if some of them got better. Or maybe I just finally caught up with playing a certain title, and it's like, oh good, this can go on the list now. But I think the retrospective 2020 list is going to be somewhat insanely different to what my current top 10 of 2020 is, because not only will I have played more of 2020's games by then, but maybe I think these ones may have gone up and down. Who knows? It's going to be a little bit insane. But yeah, I was trying to get 10 games for this list, and some people have gone, oh, I can easily come up with 10. I can't. I mean, was I just not forgiving of a lot of games this year? I don't know, but there's a lot of games I played where I was like, that's meh, it's above average, or not even as good as I thought, you know, some disappointing titles. And I don't want my top 10 of the year to be made up of games that I pretty much rate a 7 out of 10 at best. I mean, a 7 out of 10 is still good for me, but come on, I'm talking about the top 10 of the year. I want to be ecstatic and enthusiastic and passionate about doing so. If I'm talking about a game, it's like, my number 10 is this, and it kind of sucks. That's not exactly going to go down well, is it? But I did manage to find 10 in the end. However, there is a caveat or two. Firstly, for the most part, bar maybe one choice, I've had to try and exclude games that were just straight up reprints or standalone expansions. So, Kanban EV, fantastic game, 10 out of 10, I love it to bits. It is 99% identical to the original though, and it just had a graphical upgrade, which is great, but that's essentially what it had. Not really eligible. Chronicles of Crime 1400. It's a standalone expansion, nothing more. Not really eligible for a top 10 of the year. You know, it came out several years ago. This is essentially the same game, different setting. So that's not really going to count either. And there's a few instances like that where it's basically like the game is just a straight up re-implementation or standalone expansion. Therefore, I can't see why it would make this list. There is one choice on this list that might have broken that rule slightly though, but I had to come up with 10 games for this list. Give me a break. My number 10 is a game that I don't own. Like I say, it was hard to come up with 10 for this list, but it's still a fun game and deserves a good amount of respect, and the main reason I got rid of it was just mainly to fill up space. It was kind of like, you know, everything's a one in, one out affair now, and that is Town Garden. Town Garden is a cool little lightweight Euro from Thunderworks Games, or sorry, Thundergriff Games, and it allows you to build up this really beautiful, aesthetically pleasing garden full of trees and ponds and statues and various things like that, and during this you will be gaining points for doing so, but as well as that, you're also though setting up these border tiles around the whole board, which are these like really good looking landscapes, and if you position certain people, like certain individuals within the garden facing a certain way, you get points for what features they're looking at, you know, depending on the ability of the character. It's just a very light, pleasing game, and I do enjoy it. The main reason that I have a little bit of an issue with it is the fact that its graphic design needs a bit of a tweak. It's very hard to see certain symbols on those tiles, and you know, when you're looking at it from a distance, unless you've got the perfect eyesight like Zumo vision, then it's hard to tell exactly what symbols are on what tiles in order for you to work out, oh, that's how many points they're going to get. If that was tweaked to be a bit better, I think this would have gone up in my ratings and probably stayed in the collection. But I still like the game. It's just one of those things where I have to accept that I would like to play this game again. It is good fun, but you're going to have to deal with that small issue. But the game itself is still fun. It's beautiful as all get out. I mean, for the price, the money you're paid, you are getting superb production quality. Other than that slight graphical design issue, you've got the 3D sculptures of the bridges and like different statues and podiums and that. It's just, it looks so, and like trees everywhere. I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous. It is like an Instagrammer's wet dream for this game. But as I say, other than those graphical issues, for the most part, I do really like this game. It was just not one that survived staying in the collection, but it's still one of my favorites of the year, number 10. My number 9 is a little big for that shelf to fit, not to mention the glare, so I'm just going to hold it in my hand. Kingdom Rush. Now this one is kind of up in the air at the moment. I mean, this one has slightly squeaked onto the list itself, not because I think the game is bad. The rulebook could have used a little bit of a tweaking here and there, but the game is good, thinky fun. You are basically taking what the iOS version of this did, abstracting it down to a more planning, methodical style thinky game where you are defending your castle from a horde of advancing enemies, trying to place these polyomino tiles via your heroes and special abilities and defense turrets, etc. onto these different cards so that they overlap all the creatures. Once you overlap all the creatures, you get rid of them. You've got to basically kill off certain portal cards that come through with harder enemies on them, and if you do so, you win. You got different scenarios, you've got ways to tweak the scenarios itself, and you know, basically etc, etc. But the game is good, solid, thinky fun. The main reason I say it's slightly squeaked on though is because I do have a bit of an issue with the graphic design. No, sorry, the difficulty of the game. Even on its easiest difficulty, this is still rock solid hard. And I promise you, I'm looking at the rulebook correctly. I don't think I'm playing it wrong, but even on the easiest difficulty on solo mode, this is incredibly hard. Maybe it's like a lot easier with multiplayer, but it certainly on solo mode is pretty hard to win this thing. And when you consider that the game has 4 levels of difficulty in it, and it recommends you start on 3, I'm sorry, are you a glutton for punishment? That just seems a little bit insane. But other than that issue, the game is still fun to play. So if you want a solid challenge, then this is definitely one to look out for. And for me, I still have the game. I'm still hanging on to it. I'm playing it a bit more, you know, try and get a bit better at the game, or maybe some house rule tweaks to try and mitigate the difficulty in solo mode. But when I play it multiplayer, I feel it is a little bit easier to sort of grasp and like get to grips with like the challenge ahead. But it's a solid game, well produced. It's got plenty of variety in the box. But as I say, was struggling to think of 10 games, and I think if I'd had a few games that were higher rated than this one, because I think my review should have come out for it by now, then this probably wouldn't have made the top 10 of the year. But I think people are still going to get a lot of enjoyment, and I felt like it was a decent enough fare that it needed to be talked about. So my number 9, Kingdom Rush. Right, now we can start getting a bit more serious than before. If you thought 9 and 10 was a little bit iffy, then well, 8 onwards are definitely solid games. And this is Tekkenu Obelisk of the Sun from Board and Dice. It is sat there nicely with the Board and Dice games that I own. And it is a very dry, abstract Euro game in a sense. I mean, the theme here is kind of, not really present. It's very mechanical, but it's a cool mechanical game. You've got this obelisk with the dice around it that are pure or tainted or neutral depending on what side of the obelisk they're on, light or shadow. And with these dice, you use them to perform specific actions, to do all sorts of, well, Euro mechanical things, like building up some buildings, or putting tiles down on a little map, or building some statues to get extra bonuses.
Remember me!
grabbing cards with special abilities and that. I mean, it is Euro through and through. But what makes this game for me is not only the variety and the path to victory that you have, because you will not be able to do everything in this game. There's just not enough actions. So you gotta choose your path. But I like how the dice mechanic with that obelisk works. You know, you have got a lot of tactical decisions to make about which die to take, whether you're going to wait for the obelisk to twist around so that that area becomes in light to make it a bit easier for you to do the action. Are you going to do it now? Have you prepared for the fact that your action that you're really spamming at the moment is eventually going to run out of dice? What's your next move going to be? It's just a lot of cool stuff to consider, and it certainly is quite thinky, even though I'd be hesitant to play this with too many players because it does drag on quite a bit at 4 players. But with 2 and 3 and even the solo bot, you know, it's a pretty sweet game to play. It's one that I bring out every now and again, depending on the people I'm playing with. I want to be a bit more choosy about who I play Tekkenu with, but it's got, you know, decent production value. It's got a decent, like, for Euro gamers, this is like a must play. You know, it really is. You know, if you don't care about theme, then try the game out. It's really going to do you well. But for me, you know, it's a solid Euro, and for now, sits in my collection comfortably, but I can think of other games I'd rather play, hence there's 7 more to talk about on this list. My number 7 is not going to fit on that little bit of a shelf to illustrate, so I'm definitely going to have to hold this one, and it will probably take up most of the frame. On Mars from Eagle Gryphon Games. This is Vital Lacerda's, I believe, most recent affair, if you don't count Kanban EV, which is essentially a reprint of an older, like, the reprint of the Stronghold version. This is his newest unique property, I would say, in the big Euro game range. But it's a really good solid thinker though. I mean, wow, this thing will burn your brain cells out to the point they will never recover. There's a lot to consider in this game where you're deciding whether to go up into orbit to do certain actions on one side of the board or land on Mars so you can unlock some different actions. The players are vying for like area control on the planet as well as turn order in terms of whether they're up in orbit in that. Whew. There's a lot to consider. Rocket ships, you know, do you want to get people onto your planet? In which case, yeah, better get those built. Do you have the right materials to do the job? Do you have enough buildings? Oh, it's insane. And granted, as much as I like it mechanically, the main caveat I have against the game is that out of all the Vital Lacerda games, this is probably the hardest one to teach. And considering what Lisboa was like, that's saying something. This game is just insanely hard to teach. It is complex, it is like brain burny and complex. Even with Paul Grogan having a sit-in on the rule front, it's still insanely hard to teach. But that aside, if you can get into this game and just accept it's going to be a long affair, particularly with 4 players,
2 weeks,
and the fact that it's going to require a bit of investment of time, it's still good fun to play. And for anybody who is a Vital Lacerda fan like myself, you know, that I've got his other games on my shelf, not all of them I like, but some of them I do, you know, it's definitely going to be one for you. It would have been higher up in the list had this been a bit easier to sort of get to the table and teach the players, because if I think of playing a Vital Lacerda game, I'm usually going for the other ones first just because they're more approachable. But if that's not a big deal for you, then I can definitely recommend that this is a really good fun brain burner. A ton to consider, really well produced. I mean, the Eagle Gryphon Games lineup of these Euro games just look gorgeous on the table, but you're gonna have to invest some time into this one. But still, one of the best games I've played this year at number 7. My number 6, I don't have to get the box lid for you because A, it won't fit there, and B, all I have to do is just move my head a little bit like this and you can see it, yes. Number 6 is the Breaking Games Kickstarter Dwellings of Eldervale. Kind of like a hybrid game as opposed to a Euro. This one has you doing area control on a map of like different elemental tiles with collecting cards that are all based on different elemental styles of magic. Fire, Earth, Wind, Water, Heart, Captain Planet, whatever. Captain Planet! And with this, you've also got a fair bit of combat. There's the hybrid element where you're fending off other people who come to your various tiles, and as well as doing that, you kind of have to deal with the idea that these big giant monsters are on the table, some with sound effects bases like the one I've got. Yes, gimmicky, I know, but it's a good laugh. You know, that are charging around the place and getting in your way as well. It's quite in your face at times. I mean, you are going to be hitting on each other quite a bit in terms of combat, and the monsters are going to be there. They're going to be in the way, but it does a good job of marrying up the two aspects. Yes, I do think the combat is a little bit too punishing at times, but there is a variant in the book to kind of mitigate that to an extent, which I'd probably recommend you use if that's a problem. But It's got a really good solo mode with the Ghosts of Eldervale. I really enjoyed my plays of that. And multiplayer, I don't find this too difficult a game to teach despite the size of the box. I mean, this is like, you're seeing it from the short end. It goes all the way back to the wall, so it's quite big. It's very well produced. I mean, those monsters are great when they're on the board. I mean, forget the sound effects base, it's just the monsters themselves are really cool, and I like that you have got different types of cards from the different elemental styles of magic. You know, if you're playing a race and focusing on cards to do with the earth magic, then you're going to be slightly different to somebody who's focusing on, say, death magic. The differentiation could have been a little bit better with the cards, I feel, but, you know, it's a small niggle. I've already done a review of it, you can check the video out, and it's a good solid play, one that friends of mine who have played it are interested to get back to the table again, so it certainly has hit home with people I know. It's just a nice refreshing change, shall we say, to the formula. To have something that's not just pure Euro or pure Ameritrash, just to have something that's in between, that tries to have a decent theme with a little bit of Euro mechanics to go with it. It's a solid game, one of my favourites, Dwellings of Eldervale. My number 5 is a pure solo game from Czech Game Editions called Under Falling Skies, although you could pretty much just rename this as Space Invaders the dice game. That is essentially what this is. Any reference you have to Space Invaders or Independence Day is going to come through and through when you play this.
Increase speed, drop down, and reverse direction!
You are essentially defending your base, like Area 51 for example, from a advancing mothership of aliens. It's sending out its little fighters to bomb your base, and the mothership is slowly progressing down this board in order to eventually kill you off. All the while you're throwing dice and using these dice in a sort of particular way to build up your base, you know, to build extra rooms that are better, but also to do things like generate power, generate research, which you need to win the game, but also to shoot the guns at the various agents as they come down. It's just a really solid solo game, this one though. I played it as a co-op. You can play it co-op, I mean, it doesn't have to be pure solo, but I played it as a co-op online on Paul Grogan's channel, and I had a good laugh with it. I mean, we really got into grips with it, and, you know, we were discussing things left, right, you know, what are we going to do? It was tense, it was entertaining, and as I said, the theme comes through strong, because everybody has probably seen Independence Day at some point in their lives, or knows what Space Invaders is. Now, since then, I've acquired it and played it more solo. You've got a campaign element in the game that introduces more content to the game in order to add to the variety and just give you more to play with. It's just really, really solid. I mean, it's been a while since we've had like a pure solo game that has hit the ground as hard as this one does, because if you try to find this in stores, easier said than done. It's hard to find a copy of this one. You know, Czech Game Editions are really starting to do pretty well this year. Yeah, well, they've always done well, but this is kind of like the year of CGE from what you've seen from like board game stocks selling out. But yeah, good solid solo game. You know, you may think it's a bit of a big box for it, but like I say, it does come with a decent amount of content in there. And if you're like me and you just like a cool sort of solo dice game, and it's not just, oh, roll dice and see what happens. No, you've got pretty interesting decisions to make with those dice. Certain rooms can only have certain levels of dice, you know, and obviously you need to think, oh, well, I need power to fire the guns, but if I generate all the power, I won't have enough guns to fire. And looking at where the ships come down, depending where they are on the board itself, can dictate, I can shoot the ship if it comes there. If I lead that one over to there, I can shoot it there. Maybe I want the mothership to come down because the nerf that the mothership's going to inflict will not be so harsh if I get it to advance now. There's a lot of cool, interesting decisions for a rule set that's not particularly tricky either. Under Falling Skies was a bit of a surprise hit for me. I didn't think it would resonate as well as it did, but number 5 on the list, and definitely one I can talk praises about. Under Falling Skies, my number 5. My number 4 is The Search for Planet X. You know, it sounds like a really epic title, doesn't it? But it's a deduction game through and through. This one and Under Falling Skies are kind of jostling for the position. I could easily switch to 2 of these. I was kind of hard pressed to think which one I would do. And I think mainly just because I've had more plays of this than I have Under Falling Skies, that this one makes the number 4. But essentially this is a solo deduction game for me. Yes, you can play it multiplayer, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to find Planet X, and you're looking around at these, like the solar system effectively through a telescope, and you're looking at different sectors trying to find out where asteroids and gas giants and various other phenomena are, because by learning the logic rules for how asteroids are placed and how gas giants are placed, etc., you eventually pinpoint where Planet X is in order to win the game. But you're also publishing like theories saying like, I reckon that in sector 12 there is an asteroid, trying to do it before other players do, and it is just straight up logical deduction. You use the app in order to do your move, like I'm going to survey certain sectors, or I think that there's something over there. The app tells you how you've done, it gives you information, you can research other logic rules that affect this particular game because it essentially generates the game for you, and it leads to a very good thinky experience that you can do on standard or expert mode. Now the caveat I do have with this though is that it's kind of pointless playing this on multiplayer. 2-player, not too bad. The game wouldn't take too long, but 3 and 4 players, you really don't interact with the other players that much and it would just drag the game out. But I am getting a kick out of this as a solo game, hence like I said, it's sort of touch and base with Under Falling Skies. This one as a solo mode, yes you do have to go to the website in order to get the rules for it, which I think is an overlook on their part. Why is it not in the rule book? Come on. But you play against a bot on the app who basically is getting stuff right, but you've got to try and figure it out faster than the bot does based on the information. That is a solid way to play this game, and it's why it's high up on this list. If it didn't have that solo mode, this would probably be lower down, closer to say 9 or 8. But just being able to say, you know what, I need a thinky game that I can play solo that isn't quite as maybe shall we say cumbersome as something like maybe Awkward Guess, because Awkward Guess is a great deduction game that you can play solo, but I find you lose a bit of the fun of Awkward Guess if you don't have a few other players there. This one is kind of the opposite, where I feel you lose a bit of the fun if you do have other players there, and I would much rather play it solo. It was just kind of a bit of a surprise hit because it came out, didn't really have much of a splash, it was only talked about by a couple of people, but honestly, if deduction games are your thing, then you might want to check this one out, particularly if you have interest in playing it solo for the most part, because it will give you a pretty good run for your money in terms of the thinkiness required. That's The Search for Planet X, number 4. Now come on, let's be fair here. Oh, come on! Okay, yes, it was a hard tie to make a list, and I had to decide, does this one technically invalidate the rule at the start? And I wasn't entirely sure if it did. Mainly for the reason that with Mysterium Park, I actually do have my original copy of Mysterium on my shelf. I have not sold that one. So as much as I say that people could grab one or the other and still be happy, I don't think this has replaced the original Mysterium for me. That one is a bit more involved, this one is a simpler affair. But considering I gave this a 10 out of 10, I gotta give props to this, and I feel it kind of deserves to be on this list as something that is different enough from the original Mysterium to warrant it. Mysterium Park takes that mechanic of using the Dixit-style cards with a ghost trying to help the rest of the players in the group figure out who killed them and what the motive in that was. In this case, it's not so much that, it's simplified. You just have to find out the person and the location, but it's done so much quicker. The setup is like 5 minutes. The game is about 45 minutes absolute tops. You can probably get it done in half an hour if you're really quick. There's only 6 rounds you gotta deal with. But with this one, you've just got a circus theme instead. So a lot of the characters and the locations are themed around the circus, which makes for some very tough calls by the ghost, because some of the characters will have similar things across their across their cards, and even the locations, you'll be looking at them all going, there's a lot of stuff that's in that picture, oh my god, I dare say this is actually harder to win than the normal Mysterium game is, despite the fact that that one is a bit more involved. But I feel this one is just that little bit different enough. I mean, this one definitely feels like a smaller version of Mysterium compared to the big grandiose one with the DM screen and 3 different things you got to find rather than just 2, and you know, this and a couple of extra rules in there about the clairvoyance tokens, that which are not in this one. So there are significant enough mechanical changes that I thought maybe this one is okay to squeeze by my caveat a bit. Fair enough if you don't think so, but to be honest, I don't know where on earth I'd get another game for this list if I tried. But Mysterium Park is fantastic. If you like the Mysterium mechanic, you will love this game. If you were like, Mysterium takes a bit too long, maybe I don't want to have 3 different levels, I didn't like the clairvoyance tokens, then again, look this one up, because by doing away with those aspects and giving you a very quick, very streamlined affair that works with up to 6 players fine, wow, I mean, it fixed a lot of problems that Mysterium had, and I still love that game. It's a 9 out of 10 for me. This is a 10 out of 10. You know, if I'm pulling out Mysterium and I just think, you know what, I kind of need something with those Dixit cards that I can just do in 35 to 40 minutes or so with people that are familiar with the game. Oh, boom, boom. And like I say, I want more stuff to come out with this. That's a circus theme, I want a camp theme, I want a space theme, I want a rock, I don't know, pick a movie theme, whatever. Pick some like interesting thematic thing, like, oh, movies, cinema or a Hollywood style one. That'd be quite interesting actually. Could you imagine a haunted movie theater? That'd be interesting. But as I say, I love the game, 10 out of 10, absolutely a brilliant little miniature party game that is definitely recommended for anybody who enjoys any of the Dixit card style games. But even if you haven't tried any of them and you want, say, like an entry point into the idea, the genre, then give this one a look. Really cheap, really cool, love it. Mysterium Park, my number 3. My number 2 and 1 were hard to choose between. I mean, I said it was hard to come up with this top 10. It was harder to decide which one was my number 1 and my number 2, because both of these two games are fan-friggin-tastic. First up, we have Viscounts of the West Kingdom. This is the last in the West Kingdom trilogy for, you know, Architects and Paladins, which I no longer own, but this one is a brilliant game. Not quite as good as Architects in my opinion. I think the expansion to Architects just pips that one up above it. But check out my review. I am glowing in that review about this game. This one is brilliant. It's a rondel mechanic with a little bit of deck building thrown in. Some cool, interlinked mechanics for being able to do buildings and move up in the little castle in the middle or get manuscript tiles. You know, but it revolves around dealing with your little personal tableau of those townsfolk cards, which have all got different bonuses that they give you that trigger at different times. They have different costs. You can dismiss them temporarily to boost your current action, or you can keep them and like put them into your deck so that they come out and move along that little tableau of yours. And it's like, well, if I get a chance to rearrange, maybe I want this guy to be over here now. Okay, we'll put you over there, let things tick along. You've got to plan a little bit in advance. Well, I mean, just check out the review because I am singing the praises of it in more detail there. But this is an excellent Euro game. No theme whatsoever. Don't care. Like I said, there are some exceptions to the rule where theme does not have to be present at all in my Euro games, and this is a classic example. This one, the mechanics just work so, the mechanics work smoothly, even if there is a little bit of iconography, like sort of barrier to entry you've got to deal with. But it has just this really cool, thinky Euro sense of dealing with those townsfolk cards. I love the variety that offers you, and we can play this game with completely different paths to victory. I can go buildings, somebody else can go manuscripts, somebody else can go castle, and we will finish with pretty tight scores. Add to that variable setups, add to that variable characters that you can put into your starting deck, like a specific character. Add to that a different map layout, add to that one of the best solo modes in a Euro game to come out. This is a fantastic game. If anything held it back to be my number 1 spot, it's the fact that the rule book could have been a slight bit better, and the castle mechanic, or as I call it, the pinball multi-ball mechanic, is a little bit on the finicky side when trying to explain it to people and get them to sort of understand it. But that small niggle aside, this is brilliant. Love this. I mean, I only wish that Paladins had the same appeal to me. I liked it at first, but it's faded over time and now it's not in the collection anymore. But Viscounts, Architects, Raiders would probably be my number 3 at this point. These are just solid games by Garfield Games. They're really knocking it out of the park, and you know, it's a shame that Paladins couldn't have been so good for me that I could have had all 3 of them in the trilogy and tried that weird co-op Tome Saga thing, whatever it is, but I've got no interest in worrying about that. For me, it's just a case of, do I want a simpler affair, more for multiplayer experience, and I'll go with Architects. Do I want a solo game that I'm going to love, maybe 2 or 3 players max, then I'm probably going to pull out Viscounts. Both are fantastic, but yeah, honestly, this is hands down, if we're going to talk about dry Euro games for the year, this is hands down the best I've played in 2020. No questions asked. but there can only be room for one, and like I say, it was hard to choose between my 2 and 1 because both of these games are fantastic. But this one is the thematic Euro of the year. This is like one where the theme is actually pretty strong overall. But what this one does is that it doesn't necessarily do anything new, like, oh, innovative or brand new. But what it does is that it doesn't put a foot wrong in any of my weighting categories from the detailed summary. You won't get a review of this until probably the new year, so consider this a bit of a spoiler for you. Lost Ruins of Arnak. This was a surefire hit the first time I played it on Paul Grogan's video on his channel back in July, I think. Which one was it? Game 2, I think I was in? Whatever. You can probably find it on there. But maybe I'll put a link in the description, we'll see. But this one is just such a good Euro game. And people are sort of going, it's like, well, I didn't find anything particularly different in here. Why is this one getting so talked about? It's not the fact that this brings an innovative mechanic that's like all really cool. But what it does is that it brings stuff that people like, worker placement and deck building. They're like 2 of my favorite mechanics in games, okay? That's already a good thing. Multi-use cards. Your cards have a use for using the effect, but also an effect for the icon at the top. Okay, multi-use cards. So we got 3 mechanics I already adore, put together in the same game. You know, Viscounts had a similar deal. But where this one edges out is that it doesn't put a foot wrong in any of the categories. Duration. Doesn't take particularly long to play this game, all things considered. You know, 30 minutes a player is pretty accurate for this game, and even then you could probably get it done quicker if you know the game familiar-wise. Ease of play. It's got a very good rulebook. Yes, there's a lot of iconography, but you've got a reference sheet, the rulebook's good, and they commissioned Paul Grogan to do the rules videos. Fantastic. Tactics, lots of various paths to victory. Aesthetics, it looks gorgeous. Immersion, the theme will have you spitting out Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider references all game.
There are tapestries.
And longevity, there's a decent amount of variety in this, including a decent solo mode and 2 versions of the board. This just works. It doesn't like grind its gears at any point. And yes, okay, we're not talking a revolutionary new title here, but we are talking a buttery smooth, thematic Euro experience that I can get to the table frequently, teach to new players pretty easily, and still have a good, fun time. And I really had no idea I was going to like this game at first. It was a complete surprise. Didn't know anything about it coming in. It was just, oh, Lost Ruins of Arnak. What's that? Title doesn't really ring a bell. Okay, so it's Indiana Jones Expedition sort of setting. Okay, we'll go with it. But then I played it and I instantly saw a hit. This was the year of CGE for me, with Under Falling Skies and Arnak being 2 of my favorite games of the year. This was a publisher who, in recent years, I've kind of gone, yeah, they've made some pretty decent games, but it's been a while since I've seen many like massive hits from them, with the exception of something like say Pulsar 2849. But this year, 2 solid hits. You carry on at this rate, CGE is going to be the publisher to remember in these like dark times that we're in at the moment. But so much fun. I've got memories of the game I played where basically my opponent was getting stuff like the trowel pickaxe and stuff, you know, like useful stuff for going on expeditions, and I spent most of my time, I think, no, they were doing research. I was just buying lots of cards from my deck. But I was going on the expedition trying to get hold of a hot air balloon, a fishing rod, and a pocket watch. I was like the world's worst explorer, you know. I was like Jeremy Clarkson doing the whole thing of, now we reckon that 1920s archaeology needn't be tough. Here's my pocket watch, fishing rod, and Egyptian cotton bed sheets in the car or whatever. So I was just basically doing some stupid thing like that. I remember the big spider monster that turned up when I was constantly saying, please don't be a spider, please don't be a spider, and then suddenly it appears. I mean, you couldn't have jury-rigged it if you tried. Just, like I say, immersion. And also, I'm losing track of what I'm talking about here. Honestly, this is a good fun game. You need to try it. And will it impress everybody as much as it did me? Probably not. Yeah, like I said, doesn't necessarily bring anything brand new to the table, but in a time, especially this year, where I'm playing so many games where there's always some niggle thing wrong, that they get the rulebook wrong, or the immersion's not there, or the duration's far too long, where somebody, like, they do well, and then something just kind of spoils it, to get a game where it basically looks at all the boxes and goes tick, 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 maybe playing it a bit safe, but still ticks all those boxes, then come on, I gotta give it props. I'm enjoying my plays of it. I look forward to more solo plays. It is definitely my number one of 2000. Whew, there we go. 10 games for you, and like I said, this list is a bit more of a weird one compared to other lists I've done. You know, in previous years I've had more games to talk about. 2020 and COVID and everything has kind of just put a bit of a scupper on getting a lot of 2020 games played, because people are going to be at me saying, well, you know, what about this game, what about this game, what about this game, and some of them I want to play. I've got New York Zoo down on the table downstairs, not had a chance to play it yet. Honey Buzz, that's not been released in the UK yet. Aquatica is technically 2019, so I guess that doesn't count, but again, no UK release. Undaunted, probably not a game that I'm desperately going for, but again, people have talked about it. There's just a lot of games that are probably going to be good, but I haven't had a chance to play them. And a lot of it is just down to COVID. It's delayed a lot of games so much that some people in the US probably got games ahead of us. So, like I say, Honey Buzz, people have seen copies of that. We haven't. It's not in the UK yet. It looks like a game I would really enjoy. It could be a top 10 of the year, but I haven't played it yet, so I can't talk about it. And it doesn't mean that I've gone onto the online to try and find every copy of the game online to play, because I haven't had the time, and I don't think reviewing a game based solely on online plays is kind of fair, because games take longer to play online than they do in real life. So, as I say, this is my top 10 of 2020 from my perspective currently, but this is why in a year's time you're going to get my top 20 retrospective list, and it probably will undergo quite a significant change, but it'll be interesting to see whether my tastes on some of these 10 games I mentioned have changed, whether some of the games I finally get to play are like, oh yeah, this is definitely worthy of the list. Like I say, you'll just have to wait till then. Now, I hope you've been enjoying the content on the Broken Meeple channel, but I'm not the only one out there producing video content for your viewing pleasure when it comes to board games. There's a lot of channels that you should be checking out, and I don't just mean the big lot that we've all heard about and talked about to death. Yeah, watch them by all means, but check out some of the smaller creators as well that get swept under the carpet, left by the wayside. But these are passionate people about games. They talk about games, they love them, they just want to tell you about their experiences. So why not give them a look and see if there's one you consider subscribing to, including possibly this one.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Nerd Shelves.
To the Nerd Shelves. To the Nerd Shelves. To the Nerd Shelves. My name's Michael Brookhart.
I'm Judy.
I'm Michael.
Today, we are going to be
looking at board games. Board games. So many board games.
So, join me at the table.
Come join me at the table.
Join me at the table. Let's not waste any more time, and I'll meet you at the table.
So that's it for me on this episode. If you like what you see and have earned your subscription, hit the avatars to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, check out a recent upload or perhaps a suggested upload by me. Until next time, have a great Christmas, and remember, it's only a game.